stories in the Talmud. Thank you, Rachel, for recording. Thank you. And please continue to share COVID relevant info with one another in the chat as you need. Please, please, please. I don't want to prevent that from happening. So it always takes me a moment to get my hybrid brain working. So welcome to everyone in the room and in the Zoom. We're looking at these really sparse stories in the Talmud and mining them for their lessons, their reflections, their symbolism. And once you start to play at this, you really see so much embedded in these brief texts. So we just finished looking at a rather lengthy passage. And so those of you who are joining us for the first time, it's the perfect moment because we're starting a new tale, a new story. And then the last story, we saw these dynamics in the study house, in the Beit Midrash, between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. They're frenemies, maybe, or they love each other. They're in love. They're not. They're sort of a very strange relationship there that ends in tragedy for both of them. We are going to stay in the world of the study house, but in a very different way. And we're not going to look yet at the creative rendering of this story. What we're going to look at today is the story itself and other pieces of Talmud that refer back to or relate to the topic of the story. As I always say, please jump in with questions, comments anytime. And I know how hard it is sometimes on Zoom, so we'll try and monitor the chat. But from time to time, I'll also pause and ask if anyone has something to contribute. I'm going to share my screen. Before that, I almost forgot. For those online, I'm going to share the link of this source sheet. If I could find the right place for it. Here we go. And then I'll share my screen. Okay, let's view it better. See, I can't do two things at once. Even though I really am. Okay, now here's the link. And here's the screen share. There's too many things open. Give me a moment. Okay. Try this again. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So here we are with the story that Ruth Calderon in her book refers to it as return. We'll speak more about her next week. Return, meaning this is Rabihama returning from many years away in the study house. I know I had some in the Zoom last time who told me they appreciated my Aramaic English flip-flopping back and forth. So I will do that again for those who have the ability to read it in the Aramaic or in the Hebrew side to benefit from that. Rabihama bar Besa, that's his name, Azal Yativ Trei Srei Shnei Bevei Midrasha. So Rabihama went, Azal is went, to sit. Yatav, I might have mentioned this at one point, when you're looking at Aramaic and you know Hebrew, but you don't know Aramaic, the letter taf is interchanged with the letter shin. So yatav means yashav. He was sitting. And the English translation here is sat, quite literally, sat for 12 years in the study hall. Yatev trei srei shnei, 12 years, bevei midrasha, in the Beit Midrash. Ki ata, when he returned, when he came back, or when he was ready to come back. Amar, he said, La e'eved kede'aved, I'm not going to do like was done ben chachinai, like ben chachinai did. And our translator, remember the bold letters are the words that are literally in the Hebrew text, The non-bolded words are our translator helping us, telling us who was this Ben Chachinai. He came home suddenly with tragic consequences for his wife. So we're going to see that story. He basically shocked his wife to death when he showed up after so many years away. So he learned from that story, our friend Rabihama, and he said, I'm not going to do what he did. It's worth pausing and noticing what this story is not telling us. Not telling us how his learning went. It's not telling us why he decided to come home. It's not telling us whether he wanted to come back or they sent him back or why 12 years. And in the creative rendering that we'll read from Ruth Calderon, she elaborates quite a lot about what might have happened, but the text doesn't tell us. And from the fact that it doesn't tell us, she actually learns or infers, thank you for your patience with me. She infers that it was utterly unextraordinary. And we'll see what she does with it. But he says, I don't want to shock her. I don't want tragedy when I come home. So I'm going to do it differently. So what does he do? Ayel Yativ Bey Midrasha. He sat in the study hall closer to his hometown, Shalach Levete, and sent a message home. So that translation, in his hometown, it's not clear from the text. Did he travel to a different Beit Midrash and then send a message home? Or did he stay back at the same Beit Midrash and send the message before he left? You can read it in multiple ways, but he's waiting. He's waiting somewhere still in that cloistered place in the ivory tower, sending a message back. While he was still there in a Beit Midrash, which it seems is probably closer to his hometown because of what's about to happen. There's a reason, by the way, that the translator says he's in a different Beit Midrash. Like, I'm imagining, in a marathon, they have like stations, like water stations all along, like, where you're going to be able to stop, mile 3 and mile 12. So like outposts of Batei Midrash. He had gone far, far, far away. And so he's going to travel back on a long journey. It would make sense that he's got another Beit Midrash and another Beit Midrash that he's stopping at along the way. That as he's at this other Beit Midrash, Ata Rabbi Oshaya Bere, his son, came to him. His son Rabbi Oshaya, Yatev Kameh, and sat before him. When you sit before someone, a scholar, it means you're sitting to learn. So this student comes along and sits before him. And of course, he doesn't recognize his son. How long has he been gone?
12 years.
12 years. So, I mean,
Depending on when he left.
when was
He left when he was a baby.
Yeah, it could have been that his son is only 12 years old, or that 13, 14, but he's been away a long time, and the son is there learning from him.
He's a rabbi, right?
Can I?
Well, it's a good question. If just a second, Esther, I just want to answer this comment. If it's calling him Rabbi Oshaya, is it because it's already been so long and he's 25 years old and he's become a rabbi? Or is it referring to him the way that he would be referred to later in his life? Like maybe he's a 12-year-old kid now, Rabbi Oshaya.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Esther, what was your comment?
It bothers me that he was away for such a long time. Don't we value the family almost above so many things? And if a father goes away to such an extent, 12 years is a long time. How is that justifiable in order to study?
Good. So one of the themes that we're going to be looking at is this tension between the study hall and family life.
Letting down the family.
And if you commit yourself to public service, you could call it, there's a sacrifice being made. Your family's going to suffer. Your family's going to pay the price. Your wife might pay the price by literally dying even when you return. We didn't get there yet, but it happened with this other guy. So yes, thank you, Esther. And anyone else in the Zoom room that wants to make a comment? I didn't answer your question, Esther. I said, yes, that is an issue at hand
Yeah.
in the text. Anyone else in Zoom land?
Did they write, perhaps? Did they send letters to the family during this time?
Did he write home? It doesn't say. Did they generally? It could have gone either way.
I thought it was the
Ruth is gonna,
I thought it
Ruth,
was-
we're on a first name basis. Ruth Calderon, when we read her story, you're gonna see she's picking up with that question. And then Tammy is asking, is this in Babylonia? So chances are that he lived in Babylonia, but maybe he's traveled to Israel to study, or lived in Israel and traveled to Babylonia to study, something like that. I meant to look that up. Where did he? I'll tell you that next week. I'll look that up to be sure I know the geography. Okay, so Rabbi Oshaya, his son, comes before him. Hava kama misha'el le shamaita. And so he come and asked him a question, a halachic question. Rabbi Oshaya asks of Rabihama, he sees that he's very sharp. Literally, chad is sharp. Like we used that in our last conversation about the sharpening of the tools and the sharpening of minds. So this student is so impressive and so sharp that Rabihama gets upset. But what does he get upset about? Chalash da'ate literally means his mind is weakened. Chalash, weakened, but it means he gets flustered, he gets upset. And what does he say? Amar, havahacha. If I had been here, havali zerakihai, I would have had a son like this.
Interesting.
Now, what is going on with that? This is his son. Of course, he doesn't know. Who's so impressive in his learning. And Rabbi Chama says, if only I had been here to teach my son, he would have been this great.
His absence didn't have an effect on
Ah,
boy.
it didn't matter
It didn't
if he wasn't
matter.
there. He became a great scholar anyway. Who suffered? The son actually didn't
father.
suffer. The father lost the chance to participate in the upbringing of this incredible Torah
But
scholar.
also it's an insult to his narcissistic integrity because
Who's
he's saying
the father.
father, he said, I should have been here. My son would have been great. And now he finds out. what
Right, he
made a
doesn't
difference.
know yet that.
No,
yeah,
I know, but
yeah.
what I'm saying is that he'll find out.
He's gonna find out that you're not the only one that could have taught your son.
Yeah,
He
which
did
is,
fine.
which is a hard thing to.
Well, but
accept.
does that mean that it was okay that he had gone? Because his son turned out okay. I mean, we don't know about his emotional state. We don't know anything about if he missed his father, if he wished he knew his father. We don't get his perspective at all. But if the measure of success is just your Torah
Transmission,
facility and your brilliance, your scholarly brilliance, then the kid is fine. With or without his dad.
Barbara wants to say something.
Please, thank you. Barbara, go ahead. You have to unmute though.
I'm not
Yeah.
understanding how it is that the son comes and sits before him and is not aware of the rabbi's name that he's sitting before. Like a rabbi comes into the study hall, somebody that they don't know, and he's not introduced. This is Rabbi Oshaya, and
Good. So actually what you're pointing to is that there must have been some conversation or at least some visual cue about what Torah scholars dress like, or a cue that he had been maybe in this faraway place where they have a different accent or a different mannerism or a different garb, or the way of the study houses with long-term students, like would he not have, and maybe there's also an open marketplace of Torah study and exchange of ideas, despite, or regardless of whether you know their name their pedigree, who they're from. What he sees is a Torah scholar of a certain age, from a certain background, and he sits down and starts to talk with him. I don't know what the equivalent is. You know what the equivalent is? I just thought of. I don't know why I just thought of this. Oh, maybe. I had I remember I was with a group of friends in college, and I forgot what city we were in. Maybe we were in New York together, wherever we were. But it was one of those places where you have these men who sit and play chess in the park all day. Has anyone ever seen this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
It's in Europe, it's elsewhere. And you don't know who they are, but you sit down and you have an opponent.
Yeah.
And you know you have a master in front of you, usually when you have to see someone who does this, who's older, who's experienced. And they never exchange names. And I remember I was with someone, we were 20, 21 years old, and he just sat down in front of this guy and started playing.
It's like playing bridge.
Maybe, okay,
Mhm.
I don't play bridge, but I would imagine
I mean,
in
you
that.
can join.
So you're in an ecosystem of
Yeah.
some kind. An exchange of also student and teacher that's
Did you say ecosystem?
that too.
I-
That's
it
exactly
kind of-
right. But it's also, it's fluid is my point. Who's a teacher? Who's a student? Where are you from? Who cares? Sit
It
down
kind
and
of
play.
reminds me of Jacob and Joseph and the brothers when they
Yeah.
came to see him and they didn't know it was
Yes.
his.
So I was thinking about that too. And Joseph had been 17.
Mhm.
So 20 years later, he has a beard. He's unrecognizable to his brothers.
Also, are their first names mentioned, like Hama and Oshaya? How would he know that it's his son?
Right. Maybe they're not introduced by first names anyway. Although you would use, I mean, your last name then is Ben so-and-so, right? He's Hamabar, I'm forgetting it now, Bisa. So if Oshaya was introduced to him as Mr. Barbisa, so to speak, maybe Oshaya would know his grandfather's name was Bisa. But still, he clearly doesn't know this is his father, and his father doesn't know that this is his son. So let's continue, okay? Is there anybody else that wanted to jump in? Oh, I'm sorry, Farley, you had something
No,
to
I
say.
just, what jumps out to me right away is that there's like no emotional,
There's no how do you do and what's,
there's nothing about, psychological, the fact that the son's kind of been abandoned.
yeah, we don't know
All these
anything
years.
about it.
It's the, what's stressed here, I guess, is the importance of Torah.
Right. Michael, you have a hand raised?
Yeah, I do, just to say that I'm aware that and I've sent you a direct message that Rabbi Akiva was gone 12 and 12. Now that was considered wrong,
Yes.
but the 12 unto itself was not that extraordinary, understood. So he
So-
wasn't necessarily way out there, so to speak.
Thank you, Michael. So we are going to look at that story very briefly. We're going to look at it because actually this story is placed consecutive to that one. It's actually a series of stories, and it's very typical for the Talmud to kind of list similar things, this and this and this and this. They all happen to be the same. And so thank you. I was waiting for someone to bring up Rabbi Akiva. And so it seems that 12 years is kind of a typical unit of time. We know, university is 4 years. Sorry, in Quebec, it's all wackadoodle and you're there for 3 years, but
Well, right.
but 12 is sort of a round number in the ancient world, right? Okay, so he doesn't recognize him. He says, "Oh, if only I were here to teach my son could be like this." Then that's the end. That's the end of the exchange. It just shows you these are very, very brief records of an encounter. These are not meant to be, hello, who are you? Or do you want a drink of water? What are we talking about? We don't even know what they were talking about. Al lebete. Then he goes on and goes into his house. Al re. And then his son also goes into the house. Kame. Rabihama stands up for his son, which is a sign of reverence, which is backwards, but he's trying to stand And Husavar, he thought, Lemish'ale Shemaita Kabae, that he came to ask him another halachic query. But the wife is the only one in these three people that knows who both of them are. Amrale Debetu, his wife, which by the way, in Aramaic, a wife often is referred to as Neshehu, but also it could be Beitu, his house. His wife is synonymous with the home. It's just no comment on that, but it's very interesting. His wife says, whoever could imagine a father would stand for his son. That was her way of saying, psst.
Yeah.
Why are you standing for our son? So then, so that's the end of the story. And we get I know. I told you it was shorter. It was shorter than the last one. We had a whole soap opera last time. But we get a Gemara, the Talmud, sort of an aside. By the way, Kare Ale, Rame Bar Chama, they called about him, about Rame Bar Chama, this verse, Achut HaMishulash Lo Bimheira Yanatek, which is a verse from Ecclesiastes. The threefold cord is very solid, is not easily broken. What does that refer to? 3 generations of Torah scholars. Zet Rabbi Oshaya, Beno Shel Rabihama, Bar Besa, the son of Besa.
Nice.
And so actually, in a very beautiful way, we get to step back and say, wow, 3 generations of Torah scholars. How lovely. Is it said ironically? Is it said sincerely? You decide. Yes, Marilyn.
Just a sidebar, my response to threefold cord was the mother, the son, and the father.
Ah, you wanted it to be, in that moment, there's a threesome, but the woman is left out of it.
Yeah.
Because she is not the Torah scholar.
Exactly.
And it's
that's
generation, it's. not-
And without
That's the
her, there
dichotomy.
wouldn't have been a recognition of these generations even being, I mean, she was the one who calls attention to it.
Not only that, perhaps the son would not have learned Torah like that.
Yes, she sent him to the right places. I was also thinking, the fact that she's standing there means he was effective in not killing his wife when he walked in the door. Just have to say,
Yeah.
the Gemara mentions that and doesn't come back to it. The only way it does come back to it is by having her have a speaking part here. They don't always get a speaking part, the women. That is the end of the story. So that actually the punchline is, you fool, this is your son. Who you've just honored, respected, and been impressed with. And you're right, maybe it's, and I raised him that way. But the lineage is going to erase her from that equation. Thank you, Marilyn, for naming that. I hadn't even thought about that. So I'm conscious of our time, and I want to zip through a few other texts.
Yeah.
We're really gonna, like
Maybe-
that one,
maybe
we
just do the English for the. if we need to.
yeah, that's a good idea.
'Cause, I mean, it's nice. to have
Yeah,
it,
yeah. This one we sunk our teeth into. The purpose of these other texts is just to give us context. So I wanted to show you what happened with Rabbi Hanania ben Chachinai.
Easy for you to say.
Because Rabihama knew what happened with Rabihama bar Chachinai. So here's what happened. Rabihama ben Chachinai went to the study hall at the end of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's wedding feast. So that's some kind of a timing detail. And Rabbi Shimon said to him, wait for me until I can come with you, meaning after the whole Sheva Brachot week are over. However, since he wanted to learn Torah, he did not wait. Flipping the page for those in person, for the next page. And went and sat for 12 years in the study hall. So there's the 12 years. I'm sure we could figure out, why is Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai being mentioned here? What is the significance of the fact that it was his wedding? What is the significance of the fact that he didn't wait for him? But Hachinai goes, and he goes for 12 years. We also don't know what happened during those 12 years, but we know that it was such a significant departure that by the time he came back, all the paths of his city changed,
Hmm.
and he did not know how to go to his home. He couldn't get home. The place had changed so dramatically.
Wow.
He went and sat on the bank of the river. By the way, that is certainly a comment on this price that's being paid
Mhm.
for going away to pursue this Torah study. And you're going to see it continue now. He went and sat on the bank of the river and heard people calling to a certain girl, daughter of Chachinai, Bat Chachinai. So there are echoes of that other story, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Bat Chachinai, fill your pitcher and come up. He said, I can conclude from this that this is our daughter.
Yeah.
Thanks. He's the sharp one, eh?
Yeah, right.
So now I know how to get home, meaning I couldn't get home. But now there's a human contact and a human reference point, and it's my daughter, Marilyn, who's showing me the way back to the house. He followed her to his house. His wife was sitting and sifting flour. That's what she's been doing for
Yeah.
12 years. Baking the bread, keeping the house, raising the children. She lifted her eyes up, saw him. Of course, she recognized him, and her heart fluttered and she passed away. She had a heart attack.
Oy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
And then,
What reason? Good reason, bad reason she passed away.
no.
oh, I don't know. God had mercy. Well, but this is the question then. Rabbi Hanania said before God, Master of the universe, Ribono Shel Olam, Aniyazo Zeschara, this poor woman who has struggled financially because I've been a Torah scholar. This is her reward. And that has echoes of the story, by the way, with Rabbi Akiva. Zo Torah, Zo Sechara. This is Torah, and this is the reward that someone like Rabbi Akiva and the other martyrs were tortured to death by the Romans. And then oh, she lived with a miracle. He pleaded mercy for her and she was revived.
Oh, man. Oh.
We don't have to take these literally, what it means. Maybe they resuscitated her. Maybe it's that God is trying to set the balance of the world right. What, Leo?
No, come on. He pleaded for mercy for her and she lived. It sounds like he's taking the, I did it.
Yeah.
Come on. He was the reason she's fainting and now he takes all the,
He killed
what is
her
it in
and
English?
he also revived her. I
Yes.
see that Annie in our Zoom room has a hand. Please.
This story reminds me of the story of the Shumanite woman who prayed for
Yes.
a child with the prophet, and then, you gave me a child, and now the child's sort of lying dead, and then he comes and he revives the
This was
child.
the Haftorah just a couple weeks ago.
Yes,
The
it
Isha
was. That's
Shunamit.
what I saw.
Yes, thank you. No, that was good. And the son dies and she goes and protests. She says, no. I prayed for this woman, for this child. The prophet promised me this child. Okay, Prophet Elisha, this is not an acceptable end to the story. Okay, so we're gonna move on. Sorry, but we're gonna move on. And I should say that the way that Safaria notates these stories, you see it says Ketubot 62b dash. Oh, we don't have it. It doesn't print it when I print. But on the online, you can see they have like numbers within it. 62p 11 to 12. So just to know, this one was first, then 62p 13, 14. These are artificial numbers that they're assigning it for convenience of printing or of organizing. So this story was first, then came the Rabihama story that we read, and then came this Rabbi Akiva story. But they're just all mixed around. So Rabbi Akiva had a similar story, and here's the very famous story of how Rabbi Akiva at the age of 40 started to learn Hebrew, started to learn Torah, and became a great rabbi. Can't wait to see great rabbis come out of encountering Torah for the first time later in life. Okay, Rabbi Akiva was the shepherd of Ben Kalva Savua, who of course was so wealthy in Jerusalem. And the daughter of the wealthy owner of these sheep saw that he was humble and refined and proposes to him, right? She said to him, if I betroth myself to you, will you go to the study hall to learn Torah? So what this has that the other stories don't have is explicit, not only consent, but encouragement by the wife. Now, did Rabbi Akiva's wife now make it worse for all the other wives? Because everybody thought, oh, you know, my wife must also want me to leave for 12 years. or the peer pressure of the wives. You have to go send your husband. Rabbi Akiva is there. He's gonna go learn with her. But this was the condition of betrothal. And he said to her, yes, I will marry you. And I will go study. So she became betrothed to him privately, which is not the way it's done in those days, and sent him off to study. Which, by the way, she's sending off his employee.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things that this woman, whose name was Rachel, does calling the shots. So he removed her from his house. She has to suffer these consequences. Right now, she has no financial support from her wealthy father, and took a vow prohibiting her from benefiting from his property. She can't even take what would be rightfully hers as a child. Rabbi Akiva went and sat for 12 years. So like I said, it's a common unit of time. When he came back, he brought 12,000 students with him. So the fact that Rabbi Hama didn't bring back any students and Rabbi Chachinai didn't bring back any students says something.
Okay, we
It
know
was a
just
good
just because
investment.
it's not mentioned.
Okay, so we don't know. Good. We can assume we can follow it in both ways. Maybe it was so typical. We mentioned it with Rabbi Akiva, but because he started studying Torah later in life, but maybe everybody who went off for 12 years came back with students. Maybe not 12,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
But maybe Rabbi Akiva had more money.
Because he was being supported by his rich wife, who actually doesn't have her own money now anymore. I don't know. But I think it's more likely that these other Torah scholars are not returning with students. Remember, Rabbi Chama is alone in that inn, and this random kid goes up to him. I don't know, maybe there's a crowd, or maybe it's possible. Maybe there's 10 or 20 people crowding around him, and that's why the son also goes up to him. I don't know. So
There's a comment.
there's a comment in the Zoom.
Rachel sold your hair.
Oh, thank you, Tammy. I didn't remember that. The way that Rachel, the wife of Rabbi Akiva, made money was by selling her hair.
Yeah.
Boy, talk about a Les Miserables moment.
Yeah.
I didn't remember that. Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom want to jump in? Okay.
Okay.
So she sends him away for 12 years. He comes back with 12,000 students. And as he approaches, he hasn't seen her yet. He heard an old man saying to his wife, he overhears a conversation. For how long will you lead the life of a widow, of a living man? Right? How long is this going to go on that you've sent your husband away? And she said to him, if he would listen to me, he would sit for another 12 years.
Boy.
And so Rabbi Akiva hears this and says, okay, I have permission. And so he went back to study another 12 years in the study hall. And he came back next with another 12,000 students, so 24,000 students. His wife definitely heard that he was coming because she wasn't going to be surprised.
Mhm.
His wife heard and went out to greet him. 24 years later.
Wow.
Her neighbors said, borrow some clothes and wear them, like get dressed up. Your husband is finally coming home. You better put on some makeup. And she said to him, don't be crazy. He's a righteous man. He doesn't care what I look like. This is not what our relationship is based on. Clearly. She says, a righteous man understands the life of his beast. Okay, so it's a little bit
It's strong.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a bit strong, but I like Rachel. I want to like her. I want to say, even if I looked like a beast, he wouldn't care. A tzaddik understands what he owns, who he has at home. I don't know.
Why did he
Trying to
marry her?
redeem.
I still don't understand.
So it's interesting. He wants her to be a partnership. But
This
it's
is
a
not a
partnership from
partnership.
afar. It's very strange, but she's clearly willing. She is a willing partner.
Mhm.
She may be
What would-
crazy.
What would Avi say if you send him away for 12 years?
No, but Avi signed up for a lot of things he didn't know he signed up for at the beginning. We all did. When she came to him, she fell on her face and kissed his feet. His attendants pushed her away. And the commentary is because they didn't know who she was. This is the most beautiful line. It's beautiful. He said to them, leave her.
Mhm.
Shali v'shalachem, mine and yours are all hers.
Yeah,
And
if
the
if it were not for
24,000
her, you would
students.
not have all this study.
You all only exist because of her.
Yeah.
Two questions.
The question in the chat, I mean, there's a lot here in the chat. I don't know why I can't
You
see my
can't see
chat from here. Can you pull it up? Yeah. What about pru revu? That's be fruitful and multiply. You can't have children for 24 years. Yes. So there's a sacrifice here of you can't have both. You can't have a family and this kind of Torah leadership, Torah learning. And even laying aside pru revu, whether you have children or not, there's an obligation of the cohabiting of the sexual relationship that a man is obligated to provide to his wife. That's the ketubah, that's the agreement. The betrothal rather than the marriage. Oh, that's true. The other comments in the chat. It's both. So remember, we were talking about betrothal was a contractual agreement back then. So betrothal was something that was irreversible. Well, not irreversible. It was a commitment that could only be broken through a get. So they're bound to one another. The marriage would be then when he goes to live with her, but he never went to live with her.
Wow.
They were only betrothed, which is still a kiddushin, a binding agreement. That's what that was. That's the ring. So, and I see Barbara, your hand as well. So I just want to.
Not married. They're technically, they haven't cohabitated, so
Right,
technically.
exactly. They haven't, so that in the halachic language, what we would say they haven't consummated the marriage means there hasn't been nisuin. There's been kiddushin, but not nisuin, which is the betrothal, but not the marriage itself. But that is hers, that is her choice. That is her right in the marriage, and she has the right to refusal. He doesn't have that right. She does. So I want to just articulate this. It's a really interesting halachic conversation, which we could go on a very fascinating tangent that I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but in the marriage relationship, there are two mitzvot at play. One is the mitzvah of having children, and one is the mitzvah of the sexual relationship. The mitzvah of sexual satisfaction is her right. He owes to her. The mitzvah of having children is his mitzvah, not hers. He has an obligation to bear children. Of course, he can't do it without her. But the halacha understands that we can't obligate a woman to risk her life to put herself into a pregnancy. We cannot obligate a woman's body to do this. It is always a woman's choice, and it is his obligation to have children. So he has reneged, I don't know the word. He has been mochel on, that's the Hebrew, on his obligation to have children, and she has willingly foregone. She agrees to forego her conjugal rights. She has the conjugal rights, and she's ready to forego
He's
that.
conceded and
And
she's
She's
forfeited.
forfeit. Thank you. All these words. I find when I'm teaching on hybrid, there's so many
Yeah.
brain cells already working that I can't do others.
Yeah.
So I need vocabulary.
And
Thank you.
there's a comment
And
of two
yes,
people
the
want to say
betrothal,
something, and David.
yeah, thank you. Betrothal, you can end it. It's just it has to be a legal mechanism. I saw Barbara's hand
And
before,
Esther.
and then Esther, and was there someone else?
David wants to say.
Okay, so Barbara, Esther, and then David here in the room.
Okay, I have a problem with this whole story is, I mean, I'm perfectly willing to suspend belief on a lot of things. But this idea that she would, so she's not, the father's angry that she privately betrothed to him. She privately betrothed to him because he's a shepherd, and she knew her father would not approve of somebody of such low status, also somebody working as a servant for him, for his daughter, right? I mean, I think that's a normal assumption. So she sends him away to study without being officially married. Then he comes back after 12 years and overhears, he goes away. I have permission. I have problems with this whole thing. Her submissiveness and her willingness to throw away her legacy, her maternal, her biological clock. So she has nothing from this except at the end where he says, this is her, like what happened to be like my study, my, having
My Torah learning, my
So-
legacy.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So it's my legacy, my this, but she shares it with me. This is her reward, and this is what we're supposed to take from this at the end is, oh, isn't this wonderful? He feels they have a partnership here. But there is no partnership, and it's
Complaining, why are we?
and I find it a kind of, it's so demeaning. I mean, I can accept a
Why are,
certain,
Barbara, why are you
Well,
saying
where
there's
was
no,
the consummation?
why are you
of
saying
the
there's no partnership? Why are you saying that it's demeaning to her?
because she gives consent, she gives consent beyond the bounds of what a religion should be. A religion should not, it's almost like it's uninformed consent. Like either she's been so totally brainwashed to think that this is something that she should consent to, or she really is a masochist and considers
So
herself.
I know that there are people who want to respond to this very badly. And Esther, I know you had your hand before. So was it about this that you want?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So Esther and then David and everyone else and I see Susan. So, okay.
I
Esther.
totally understand what you're saying, Barbara. But I see a flip side possibly. She may have been barren and knew about it, and she's in total control here. So she has a mate. She's sponsoring him to go and get educated to be a rabbi. He comes back with 24,000 or whatever number of people. So it's a sort of successful in that way, and that fulfills the thing. Not that I agree with it, but I see this other side.
So David, go ahead.
Yeah, but I wonder if there's been a queer lens put on this, because it reminds me of these marriages between this unconsummated marriage is very convenient for two queer people. And they were Rabbi
So
Akiva was quite old to get married at the age of 40, and who knows what's her story.
That's so interesting. So
Has
there
it
is
been
one
done?
rabbi, I can't remember now the name, where it explicitly articulates the tension that we're just talking about between building a family and Torah study, but it says he never married because his passion wasn't for women, his passion was for Torah, something like this. Maybe it doesn't say wasn't for women. I might be inserting that phrase. But that his passion or his like his lust, his desire was for Torah. And I don't know if he's also sublimating a passion that he also can't express in that society. I don't know why Rachel wants a husband in name only, right? You're just kind of raising this question of what did queer people or gay people do in the ancient world? How did they manage? And by the way, not just in the ancient world, in the ultra-Orthodox contemporary world,
Exactly.
there are sexless marriages because they know they need a marriage for the other reasons.
I think it can be quite convenient for queer people to
And
do
yet
this. I mean, it's been done.
And there are people, there's a dating website for queer Jews that actually Avi interviewed this woman on his podcast a number of episodes ago. It's called Yenta Over the Rainbow. It's very cute. And it's specifically for LGBTQ Jews to find one another, which is very hard to do sometimes because you're a small sliver of a small population within the population. So, but she said there are all kinds of people who come to that website for all different reasons. One of which might be Haredi people looking for a partnership. That is, if I'm a gay woman and you're a gay man and we need to agree to be married, but quietly know what we can and cannot do, that's really good for me because then I can stay in the community. Wow, what a tangent, but really interesting to ask this question of why would Rachel agree to this? While I'm talking about the Haredi community, I'm going to just take license to take over the room for a second more, and then I promise I will call on all the people with the hands. But when you ask this question, Barbara, of how could she say your learning is my comfort or is my legacy, or what kind of BS has she swallowed? And I don't think she was raised with that. She was raised in a wealthy man's household to marry another wealthy person. But in the ultra-Orthodox community, it is very much the culture of my husband's Torah learning is my legacy. My son's Torah learning is my legacy. One of the bumper stickers that Avi saved for me, we never put it on the car. It's just hilarious. But it's like, when someone finishes the whole cycle of Daf Yomi, the cycle of Daf Yomi is a 7-year undertaking, and you finished Shas, and there's a bumper sticker that says, "My husband finished Shas." Like, that's my accomplishment. Do you know how hard I worked so that he could do that for our family? Okay. Annie and Susan, and then I'm going to turn to this room if anyone else, and then we'll read the chats. Go ahead, Annie.
Okay, I have 2 points. One is that we're talking about Rabbi Akiva. We're not talking about your average husband. This is like one of the greatest Talmudic and Jewish scholars of all time.
She saw the potential in him.
But if you want to parallel it to great surgeons, great artists, great musicians, what did their wives have to, I mean, really great. I don't mean like everyday ones. What did their wives have to sacrifice in terms of the time they spent with them, in terms of the children?
Yes. Well, Annie, I mean, you don't even have to go very far. Think of military spouses, right? People who go away for years at a time.
So it's not only
Sundays in the Park with
Torah
George.
world. It's not only in the Torah world, it's in the regular world as well. And I don't know, I have 2 children who are a principal, a teacher. I did a lot of things in my own life, but I kind of feel that they're my legacy, that they're going on to educate thousands of kids, and our children can be our legacy. Her husband, I guess, and the students are the children that she didn't have.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to say. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I want to give Susan a chance. She was waving her hand, and then I know Margaret also had something to say. You need to unmute. Susan, just take a minute to unmute.
Up top, there.
Okay, I want to ask you, is this story based on fact?
Mm,
we don't have historical evidence to it other than this text. And there's not going to be, they're not going to discover an ancient cuneiform tablet or whatever it would be to corroborate that it happened in this way. Remember, when we're reading these midrashic tales, the question is not, did it happen exactly this way? The question is, what is this trying to communicate, to teach? What is that state?
Okay,
So
okay,
we can't really know.
okay.
I want to just read the comments that are in the chat. Yes, my Torah knowledge and yours is actually hers. That means she educated through Akiva, she educated 24,000 people. Yeah, it was because the father did not want her to marry him. Yes, exactly. Not just my legacy. Akiva was able to instruct thousands. Same idea. Exactly. Behind every great man is a woman or man. Yes, yes. Behind, I mean, think about it. No great person. Every person is a great person, but no great accomplishment can happen without a team around you. I remember reading about a long distance swimmer. She wrote, everyone thinks swimming is a solitary activity. And she said, nothing could be farther from the truth. I can't do this without my team, my nutritionist, my whatever, my spouse, my this, my that team. Did you want to say something?
I just think that today it still exists very much the draw in Israel, in the Haredi community, the brilliant scholar, that's the lure, that's the excitement. We saw it in Shtisel. Did we not?
Of course.
Did we not see a great example?
Go away
of Shtisel?
and learn.
And do you remember how she looked in the window and
Yes.
he was devoutly studying and she was turned on and excited and she wanted him.
Yeah,
It had to be him. Her
right.
family.
Also outside of the family,
Yeah,
like she
the
did it
mother
herself.
didn't
That's
approve
the-
of this,
the-
tried
this
very
whole-
hard.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Jewish, there's tremendous emphasis. There's yeshivas that are very, the women want those men in those
Yeah,
yeshivas.
desirable. Yep, yep, yeah.
But the good news is those women are working now.
Yeah.
Well,
A
it's
lot
hard
of them.
because then they're also working
Raising
and
kids.
raising kids and,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I want to give voice to people who
Interesting.
had their hand up, Richard and then Francis as well. Who haven't spoken, people who haven't spoken.
Yeah, I look at this as a homily of a successful marriage that also, results in a lot of students becoming aware of Yiddishkeit. When she says a righteous man understands the life of his beast, it's a compliment to him. She's quoting a proverb. So I don't think she's really
Right.
comparing herself to a beast. It's a proverb that came to her mind, and
Right.
but the implied commentary here is not that I'm a beast, but that,
That he's a righteous man, he gets it.
you
He
can
gets
say,
it.
yeah, he gets it. And if
What you do say like,
if a righteous man understands the life of his beast, well, so much more would he understand the life of his wife. So she's taking credit for she's recognizing that she didn't do this for nothing. He doesn't take it for granted. He understands her contribution, and she's giving him credit. And then, of course, he says, "My Torah knowledge and yours is actually hers." He then, as you said, and I'm not adding anything here, is that she's crediting him.
Yeah.
Sorry,
He's crediting
her.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's telling his 24,000 students, whether it's, the number doesn't matter, it's due to her. So this is a story of a couple, and of course, the thing I meant to say, important here, he asked for her permission. Or he didn't ask for permission, sorry.
He only went with her.
He only went with her permission. So again, it's not like I know, I understand, it's implicit, I can do this because Torah study is more important than marriage. No, he wasn't going to do this until he recognized he had her permission. So it's a story very much about the two of them contributing to 24,000 people.
Yeah, and their marriage they have their own contract between them. And sometimes you look at a marriage and you think, how does that work? He's traveling all the time, right? And yet,
Mhm.
if they've worked it out,
Mhm.
they've worked it out.
Yeah.
But from the outside, we may look at that and think she's so oppressed. And we don't know. I'm very conscious of our time, and I know there are more who want, Francis, can you speak for just a minute to what you wanted
Okay,
to
1
say?
minute, ready, go. Okay. No, the first two, Agada, for me, this is about family. And the third one is also about family. You know, the first two are kind of the, you know, the golden kid, you know, the real family generations continuing on, you know, the whatever. But the third story is also about family. And I really find it's beautiful because I put the comment in the chat that really it's not about just her learning for Akiva, but the fact that the family was these 24,000 other people that entered this kind of Torah
Right.
family. So it's I see it's all, they're all family related somehow.
Yeah, yes. So you're saying that they didn't bear children, but these are the children. This is the family they built.
That
Together.
exactly. So I see all three are the family related, and I don't see the conflict between the learning there. Anyway, that's less than a minute. Thank you.
Thank you. That was perfect. I'm going to read briefly this last text, which we're not going to talk about. The reason I've included it is because it shows the debate between Rabihama and his son. We're going back to our original cast of characters now. It's the Baba Batra 59. And Ruth Calderon in the story we'll read next week uses this, even though it's not in the same place. So we're just going to literally read through it and say goodbye. Rabbi Yehuda says that Shmuel says, right in the name of Shmuel, with regard to a pipe from which water is draining into another's courtyard, and the owner of the roof comes to seal the drainage pipe. Okay, so the water is draining to somebody else's property. The question is the owner of the roof doesn't own the property where the pipe is coming out into. The owner of the courtyard can prevent him from doing so. Just as the owner of the field can say to him, just as you have acquired my courtyard for the purpose of throwing your water into it, I also acquire the water of your roof. Since I wish to use it, you may not seal the pipe, right? I actually like that the water is coming into my courtyard. So it's not really yours, even though it's coming from your roof. It was stated that there was a dispute with regards to this. This halacha came by way of a dispute between Rabbi Oshaya and his father. Rabbi Oshaya says the owner of the courtyard can prevent the owner of the roof from sealing the pipe. That's where we landed on the halacha. That is correct. While Rabbi Chama, Rabbi Oshaya's father, says he cannot prevent it. And then they're going to have a little conversation. Rabbi Oshaya went and asked his grandfather, he went over his head, Rabbi Chama's father, Rabbi Bisa. And Rabbi Bisa said to them, he can prevent. You see, the son was right. Zaidi confirmed it. So talk about 3 generations of Torah scholars, but the father is like the loser here. The grandson goes over his head to the grandfather.
That's
Just
meaning
a
was
minute.
right, 2 against 1, that's it.
Exactly, right, exactly. Majority rules. Rami Bar Chama read the verse about him. This verse, a threefold cord is not quickly broken, saying that this applies to Rabbi Oshaya, Bar Chama, Bar Bisa. 3 generations of Torah scholars in one family conversing with one another in matters of Torah.
This is a perfect
So
metaphor.
we'll pick it up next time.
That the pipe is the conduit.
Oh my gosh.
It is. We're talking about 3 generations.
That's amazing. That's so
you know that you
interesting.
can't block just
Uh-huh.
because
Once the
you
water
know
goes,
once the
continuity is
seed
there.
is issued,
right.
then
That's
it's
so
the son
interesting.
and the grandson that carry on the lineage. You can't stop it. Anyway,
So next week we'll look at the
I can't believe
literature
I'm
that
the
came
only
out of
one
this.
that's
That's amazing.
about that.
That's amazing that you saw that.
well, now I
Um,
want to know what Ruth Calderon is.
Yeah, don't you? So next week. Thank you.